What's up, everybody? Today we're breaking down some of the biggest questions from the league's reigning six-ranked scoring offense, including who is even RB1 here. Will last year's number 2 overall pick even be playing much offense, and who stands out inside this rather loaded wide receiver room? We're talking all thing Jaguars with John Shipley himself, your favorite beat reporter's favorite beat reporter. John, thanks for hanging out, man.
I appreciate having me on, man. I love coming on, and it's an exciting team to talk about for one of the few times I've been covering.
100%, man. Again, it's just this mixture of obviously coming off one of the better seasons, in the franchise's recent memory, but with still so many question marks there. So I think a lot of us do believe in the Trevor Lawrence, Liam Coen partnership overall. But man, we need people like you with boots on the ground to help us fantasy nerds try to figure out who's even going to be touching the football. So, John, wanted to get right into it with just the biggest question. Big picture, how do you see the Bhayshul Tuten, Chris Rodriguez, LeQuint Allen committee unfolding?
Yeah, it's one of those things where they had their team scrimmage on Friday, and one of the big things was they did kind of, I think, show a little bit of maybe what the big picture looks like. I don't think much in terms of maybe who went out there first, but Tuten did a lot of, in between the 20s work. Once they got near the red zone, it was, Chris Rodriguez, especially in short yardage. LeQuint Allen basically was on the field for every single third down. I think that's going to be probably similar, but in terms of actual split, I still think the Jaguars themselves don't know. And I don't think it's they don't know because they're just kind of clueless. I think they're going to let it kind of sort itself out because, I mean, when you look at the profiles of, specifically Tune and Rodriguez, Liam Coen spoke in March about, the things he values the most in running backs being yards after contact, rushing yards over expectation. I mean, both those guys fared pretty well there in terms of their profiles. I know Tuden, him being such a short yardage guy last year, kind of skewed his numbers a little bit. He had so many of those goal line carries. But I mean, Chris Rodriguez, if you just look at like the pure metrics that, Liam Coen has said that he values the most, he's one of the more efficient running backs in the league. You add in Liam's relationship with him, and it's pretty easy for me to see him having a fairly significant role in the offense, despite, I know everybody's saying is, well, he's Chris Rodriguez. He's never, he didn't have a significant role with Washington. Right? I think it could be different this year. I really think it could be a, game script can, define what it looks like, kind of riding the hot hand. Because Liam showed us in Tampa, he can get 3 running backs on the field. He did it last year to a lesser extent, but he's shown before that I really think that they're okay with an offense where maybe one guy isn't the lead back, and they're kind of going with a by committee approach. But I mean, both guys have been impressive so far in training camp. I think Rodriguez, especially since the pads have come on, you've seen that ability to get the tough yards. And then Tuden, I mean, he's been popping off long runs the last several practices, even when the running game was kind of slow at the start of training camp. His biggest thing, last year, and he even noted it this offseason, was, I mean, going from, small school in North Carolina to Virginia Tech to NFL all in a quick span. The NFL offense was a lot for him. And, he told me during the offseason that coaches basically told him, they're like, when, more or less, when you know what you're doing really well. He feels like he has a better grasp of the offense now. So I know it's kind of a political answer, but I don't know if they do know if there's an RB1 or even if one exists, because I think that they do think they're all talented kind of in different ways.
For sure, for sure. Did want to, again, give some props to Chris Rodriguez, though, because you're right. Sometimes we kind of throw him in there like, oh, really, is Chris Rodriguez could be a problem. My just issue, though, coming into summer was this foot injury that was going on. But again, your opinion right now, he looks fully back to 100%?
Yeah. Yeah, he started the first several days of training camp. He didn't get like a single team rep. He was just doing individual drills. They said he was cleared, but they were slowly easing him in. And then it seems like with each practice, he's doing a little bit more and more. And then yesterday's practice, it almost seemed like him and Tuden had kind of an even split in terms of work, with the first team offense. Okay. So, they've said that they don't believe he'll be an issue for week 1. And everything I've seen so far, I don't think so as well.
It is one of those things, guys. Again, looking at the ADP right now, all of us are so confident Bhayshul Tuten's going to be the lead back. I do think you can make an argument he has the most upside overall, but Chris Rodriguez maybe low-key could be in a bit more of a, poor man's Dave Montgomery or middle-class man's Jordan Mason, whatever you want to call it, sort of role. So again, this offense is going to be great, and we're seeing them in short yardage. Really could be even more than one running back that got going. As John mentioned before, Rashad White and Bucky Irving both turned in top 24 numbers under the tutelage of Liam Coen a few short years ago. As as always, do invite you guys, if you want more fantasy info, rotowire.com, code Ian20, 20% off any of our lovely subs if you're trying to win a few extra dollars playing fantasy football this year. But John, back to your Jaguars and back to the passing game, man, because again, muddle committee, we get it, but let's face it, Travis Etienne was doing his thing last year, but really, in my opinion, like the breakout down the stretch was Trevor Lawrence playing the single best football of his career. Didn't come, though, with Travis Hunter actually active on the offensive side of the ball. Flashed before he got injured. But how much have you actually seen Hunter playing offense? Because, again, you look at the depth chart and we tend to believe, oh, okay, they need him a little bit more at cornerback. But I don't know, man. You use number 2 overall pick on the guy. You trade all those draft picks. You would like to think they're still going to use him on offense. What have you seen?
Yeah, I think there was a misconception this offseason when, it became clear that Hunter was going to play more of a role at corner, that maybe it meant not a role on offense. Is it as big of a, he entered last year as a, clear starter on the offense and then kind of dabbled on the defensive side. I don't think it will be that, but I mean, I'll say what they've done with him in training camp. Last year, he would start a practice at receiver and then spend, if he's where he started practice, he would spend pretty much the whole day there. Now he's playing both sides in every single practice that I've seen. The numbers have skewed toward defense. I think, Mike DeRocco, the ESPN, the Jags ESPN beat, does a great job of doing his best to try to track all Travis Hunter 11-on-11 reps, with switching the jerseys and everything. I think has like around 90 11-on-11 reps at corner and 50-something at receiver. So he is playing more corner, and I do think his role will skew a bit more corner this year just based on how the team is made up. But, I mean, he's pretty clearly, to me, still going to have some kind of role on offense. They're still working him in with the first-team offense. Is he playing as much as Parker Washington with the offense? No. I wouldn't even say as Jacoby Myers or Brian Thomas, but it's not a situation where, they drafted 2 6-round receivers. Neither one of them is going to play more than Travis. So Travis, I think, is going to play a fairly decent amount on offense, considering he's also probably going to be the number 1 cornerback. Now, what does that mean for him on a week-to-week role? That, I think, still remains to be seen because, like I said, it's different than what they did last year. He was really one of their starting receivers until he got hurt last year. Was probably going to have the passing game funneled through him, when he had gotten hurt. That was at least all the signs. But, and from what I've seen from him, I think they're taking a different approach with him, just in terms of usage, too. Last year, they kind of stuck him in the slot, did a lot of the, gimmicky kind of stuff, a lot of screens that, for such a good screen player, their screen game was terrible last year. There's less of that I've seen in camp so far. I've seen more letting him be on the outside, letting him win downfield vertically, which I think is more so his game, even if he can do those amazing things with the ball in his hand. So do I think like he's going to be, playing 80-85% of the snaps at receiver and be what you would expect out of a receiver you pick number 2 overall? I don't, because he's just such a unique case. But I do think they're going to get some value from him on offense this year, probably more so than people expected coming into the summer.
Good to hear some good, downfield action, though. I mean, for my money's worth, just watching him last year, skying up above the Chiefs dudes, just really making some nice plays at the catch point. So love to see them leaning into that. You mentioned, though, not playing at nearly as much as Parker Washington or the other guys. I'm just trying to put 2 and 2 together. If Hunter is coming in more so on the outside, BTJ, Myers, are they usually coming off before Parker in these situations?
From what I've seen in training camp, and there's a limit in terms of what teams like we can't say specific usage. I think Parker Washington is going to lead the Jaguars receivers and snaps and routes run. And honestly, I'm not sure how close it's going to be either. I'm not seeing Parker Washington off the field very much for the Jaguars.
You think he's already getting the gold jacket fitted? Sounds like it's been a pretty good training camp.
It seems so. Like their entire strategy for their passing game is to spread the love, spread the ball around. We don't have a quote unquote number 1 because that's how they'll attack you, but if they had a number 1, if you had to pick a guy, I think it's Parker Washington. I mean, him and Trevor are now going into their 4th year, kind of throwing together, and you can see that chemistry. I mean, they had a play during Sunday's practice where Trevor just uncorked the ball. It had to be like 50, 55 yards, and Parker runs right under, and Trevor had said they, had worked on that play, a ton before practice, a ton in the weeks prior, and that kind of chemistry I just think has been evident. There's been nobody who's really been able to cover him. That's not to say the other guys haven't been impressive. I think Brian Thomas Jr. has had some really good days. He's looked good also as a vertical threat, but also looked better going across the middle. Jacoby Myers, when they get on 3rd downs and, in the red zone drills, he's been fantastic. But Parker is the guy who, I think if people are trying to figure out who's on the field when they're in 12, who's on the field in the instances when they do go 13, I think it's Parker Washington.
I love the chemistry angle there. Again, this is your 8th season, I believe, on the Jags beat. So you've seen everyone that Trevor Lawrence has been throwing the football to, and even a few
Seen a
years before
few.
that. with with Parker, look, Jaguars receivers since Trevor got to Jacksonville, they lead the NFL in drops, man. I don't think it's all been on T-Law. Obviously, it's a drop. It's a wide receiver stat. But like Calvin Ridley, so many near misses. Christian Kirk had some good years, but again, just not quite like booming. In your opinion, like is the T-Law Parker Washington just chemistry at another level than any other receiver we've seen?
Yeah, it's hard for me to think of any other receiver who had this kind of chemistry with Trevor. I'd say Kirk was maybe close, but
Mhm.
and I think maybe this is some recency bias, but I think the Parker Washington 2026 is better than any version of Christian Kirk that the Jaguars
Yeah.
got. Guys who played with Trevor for multiple years, Zay Jones. I don't think that connection was really anything like Trevor and Parker. Marvin Jones, same there. Uh, Going to the Laquan Treadwell and Tavon Austin deep hits from the Urban year. Now, I think, and Liam made the same point, early in training camp. He said out of all the guys on the offense, Parker and Brendan Strange are the two that he's thrown to the most. Because I mean, it's sometimes hard to believe because of how productive he was, but he really has barely thrown to Jacoby Myers. And then obviously Brian, last year Brian was injured and they had their issues with connecting. Then the year before Trevor was injured. You can just see the pure volume of reps that Trevor and Parker have had together come together on the field. And I think that is a big reason, like that trust level is very, very big, for any quarterback, but especially Trevor.
You mentioned BTJ, kind of battling through some ailments last season. Was able to get out there and battle through, on Sunday, but us, just watching TV, we never know exactly what these guys are going through. Just also, man, uncharacteristic drops. I don't want to say the dude had the yips out there, but just routine plays that we expect someone like Brian Thomas to make weren't really made last year. Do you see him looking more like just the world beater we saw in 2024, or just, again, good football player, just kind of being part of the offense?
Yeah, it was so like his rookie year, all the way up until probably like 75% of the way through training camp, you're like, all right, where is this guy? And then he has a
Yeah.
joint practice against the Buccaneers where he just tears them up. And then he has this great season. So a lot of, people among the beat thought, all right, maybe he's just a gamer. He's not a practice player. Last year, his training camp was brutal last year. His, you know, training camp, there were times, last year in camp where you could tell. I mean, the Jaguars have said they were working on Jacoby Myers trade during training camp. They traded for Tim
Yeah.
Patrick before week one. They clearly had concerns about their receiver room fairly early in the year. Him and Trevor just could not get on the same page. And then it carried over into the season. Their first play of the season was a go ball to Brian that it was nowhere near being completed. And I turned to somebody and I said, that looks like every single target between them in training camp.
Jeez.
And then this year, it started in the offseason. It's looked a lot different. It's looked more like, they're on the same page. Not nearly as much as I'd say Parker and Trevor, but at least closer to that. Whereas last year, it looked like just two puzzle pieces that didn't fit together. And Brian is doing more than simply just winning downfield. I mean, he had a nice touchdown in the middle of the field on a contested catch during their scrimmage. I think you are seeing a version of Brian Thomas that is closer to 2024 version, 2025. If we'll ever find out really why he had a down year, I'm not sure. I think there are a multitude of factors, injuries, his role in the offense. They clearly wanted him to kind of be an alpha dog. Let's flow our whole passing game through you, receiver,
Mhm.
to start the season, and it just didn't work out that way. So now I do think he is closer to, like you said, a productive guy who's a part of the offense. I think he's closer to that in terms of what his role will be than he is from 2024, where he's just the absolute go-to guy in the offense.
Sure.
Because I think there'll be games where he might have 3 catches, 25 yards, and then the next week he has 100 something yards and 2 touchdowns. I just think that's the kind of season he's going to have, but I do think that the Jaguars, they're okay with it. I think that they're completely content with him being a part of a high-powered offense that maybe doesn't specify one guy. does Brian's like game kind of translate to that? I think that remains to be seen because his game, you would think, kind of translates more to the high volume, just keep chucking it at him. But I have seen an improved Brian Thomas Jr. And I mean, Liam Coen, the thing I love about covering Liam is, I mean, he doesn't know how to keep anything to himself, as you saw during the whole Robert Saleh stuff.
Yeah.
Liam's very, wears his heart on his sleeve, so he'll tell you when he's down on a player. He's been effusive with his praise for Brian Thomas this year, this training camp, this offseason. And that wasn't the case last year when he was going through his thing. So I do think that's something.
And he is, again, just piece of the offense where if you can get that connection going, man, it just makes everything that much easier underneath and intermediate when you got to worry about that demon, getting behind the secondary and everything like that. Could even make it easy for Brenton Strange. Obviously got a nice little contract extension this offseason, but also drafted multiple tight ends, including with their actual, first pick in the second round. Have you seen, like in team periods, more of an emphasis on multi-tight end formations than maybe what you've seen in the past?
Yeah, there's definitely been more of that because I think that they just internally, like their tight end room this year more than they did last year when, the backups of Johnny Munt and Hunter Long, the whole thing, how I think Liam kind of views it is, you know, he is perfectly okay with playing 11 personnel all game if he has to because he has the receivers to do it. But he is open to expanding it more, multiple tight end usage if he has the pieces. I don't think he thought he had the pieces last year because, I mean, you come out in 12 personnel with Johnny Munt and try to make it look like 11 or whatever. Nobody's going to respect that. It's Johnny Munt. Same with Hunter Long. I think that their hope is that, Nate Boerkircher specifically, is able to kind of step in and give them something in terms of, holding his own on the line of scrimmage to kind of free up Brenton Strange. Now, does it make sense to use a number 56 pick to make sure Brenton Strange doesn't have to block more? That's a fair debate to have, but that seems kind of what they want to do. They want to have another guy who can kind of, do what Strange did last year, which is, Strange was consistently setting the own on the line of scrimmage, both in the run game and the pass game. You look at a lot of his catches, a lot of chip releases, and then he's just kind of catching as a check down. I think that they want to do more with Strange this year. And the way I believe that they want to do it is, okay, when we come out in 12 personnel now, we can move Brenton Strange around the formation. We can put him in the slot. We can line him up out wide because you're not asking Hunter Long to block Will Anderson anymore.
Yeah.
That's how I think they kind of see it. And I think that they're going to be like a league leader in 12? I don't think so, but I think definitely more in last year where they were like, I think mid-20s in 12 personnel usage.
It is wild just again looking at all these different pieces at tight end. Now we have the Parker Washington breakout. They brought in Jacoby Myers. BTJ is playing better. I mean, is it safe to say this offense in general looking a lot more smooth than August and year two of T Law and Liam Coen versus last August?
Oh yeah, I mean last August it was sputtering because guys have said multiple guys on the offensive roster have told me dating back to last year that Liam's offense is the most complex and hardest that they've had to learn. Like Liam simply throws a lot at him, and you could see. I mean, through the first 7 games, they were 4-3. Trevor was bottom quarter percentile in pretty much every key quarterback metric, and then they just get hot. Now, a big part of that was you have Jacoby Myers instead of De'Ami Brown, and so on and so forth, but. I think that this is an offense that's definitely looking smoother than it did this time of year. And I think this is pretty easily the best supporting cast I've seen around Trevor Lawrence. Like I've seen Trevor Lawrence teams where his top weapons were James Robinson and Laviska Shenault. So the way that they've kind of rebuilt this offense, just in terms of pure skill talent around him, I think is one of the more impressive things that they've done. So yeah, some of the guys were here. Brian Thomas was here. Brenton Strange was here. Parker Washington was here, but bringing in Jacoby Myers, and then, I mean, Travis Hunter, even if he's not going to be, obviously, one of the top snap guys at receiver, it's a very poor way to phrase it for a number 2 pick, but best receiver 4 in the NFL by a wide margin. That's just kind of how they're built.
It's funny. We talked about Johnny Munt recently, who Kevin O'Connell once upon a time said was the best number 3 tight end in the NFL. So I do get what you're saying. And again, it's just good pieces that really do help out the overall offense. I did notice that, unprovoked shot Laviska Shenault, though, John. Dozens of us still believe, okay, the man's not done yet.
I was all in on Laviska Shenault. Yeah, I thought Laviska Shenault was going to be. And then what was it? He was the 2020 draft. Everybody thought the 2020 Jaguars were going to be just god awful. Week one, James Robinson, Laviska Chenault dunk on the Colts. And all of Jacksonville thought they had their next pieces, and then they lose like 15 games in a row, and Laviska's barely heard from him ever again. I was all in on Laviska, though, man. I thought he was going to be great.
There's always, 2024 Saints were just world beaters in the first 2 weeks. Then injuries happen or just regression hits, or you find out you just played a really bad team in week one. But I do love when we get that, yearly storyline. Anything can happen in the NFL. John, thank you so much, man. You want to throw a bull call out there before you leave? Just saying, you could.
Wait, what was that? One more what?
I said, do you have a bull call you want to throw out there? I'm not forcing you.
Yeah, I got one. I'll go with. I believe that Nate Boerkircher, by the bye week, has 3 touchdown catches and less than 10 actual catches.
Wow.
I think Liam Coen has seen every wow, this was a reach, and will purposely scheme him up touchdown. Like Hunter Long had like 2 touchdowns in the first month last year. But Nate Boerkircher did. I think Liam Coen will go out of his way to make him a touchdown vulture.
I don't know about you guys listening to this, but I will be having some first touchdown Nate Boerkircher tickets going on this year. And their bye week is week 7, everyone. So I thought you were going to just tell me some more Parker Washington propaganda, and I would have taken it.
I'll get weird with it.
At _John Shipley. Again, catch John, all of his fantastic stuff at Jaguars on SI. Thank you so much, John. Best of luck to you and best of luck to your Jaguars this season. Guys, that's going to wrap up this edition of the show, though. Hope you enjoyed it. If you like the show, please like the show. And that subscribe button always helps as well. So training camp, we're here. Preseason action coming up. John and I are so excited. So best of luck to all you and your fantasy drafts. And yeah, let's keep on talking ball. Why the hell not? So for John, I'm Ian. And until next time, take care, everybody.